This video shows how to bare root and plant a bald and burlapped tree. The planting was done in McIntyre Park in Charlottesville, Virginia by the Charlottesville Area Tree Stirrers, an all-volunteer organization dedicated to maintaining the existing tree canopy and expanding it. As we proceed, we will list the kinds of tools and materials needed at each stage in the planting process. At the start of the planting process, you will need the following tools and materials: a tarp to collect soil taken off the roots of the tree, bolt cutters to cut the heavy gauge wire of the cage securing the burlap to the root ball, a box cutter or knife to cut off the burlap, pruning tools in case any pruning is needed, and a hose or bucket of water to assist with bare rooting and to keep the roots moist once the soil has been removed.
Okay, so this tree is in the form they call bald and burlapped. As you can see, the root ball, the soil around the roots has been wrapped in burlap, and then a wire cage is placed around it in order to keep it secure. So the first thing we need to do is to take the wrappings off, starting with cutting off the wire cage. Somebody want to cut the other side?
Want you guys to help?
Yeah. So the reason we're doing this is to be able to get access to the root ball, so that we can then see what the roots look like. Coming in. You got it. So we're going to start this process of bare rooting the tree, removing the soil from around the roots so that we can inspect the roots and decide whether it's going to be suitable for planting or whether we need to do some pruning on the roots, or sometimes the roots are so poorly formed that we can't even plant the tree. So that's what we're going to start now. So we're just teasing the soil away from the roots. The soil is pretty loose, so it's coming off very easily. Sometimes you have to use a tool to get the soil off. And we're saving the soil because we'll use it in the planting process later.
Yeah, this is good. This is better than I thought it was going to be.
When you go to buy a tree at a nursery or at a big box store, you can see the trunk and you can see the branches, but you can't see the roots. So to make sure you're not trying to put a tree into the ground that has a root structure that's seriously deformed, you have to get the soil off and take a look. So the roots are all
Turn it over now,
coming out laterally, which is the way you want them to be coming out. Yeah, let's turn it.
Bare rooting the tree in this video revealed no significant root problems, so no root pruning was needed. This is not always the case. Often you will find dead, damaged, circling, or girdling roots that need to be removed. Sometimes root problems are so severe that the tree will not be able to succeed and should not be planted. At the planting phase, you will need the following tools and materials: a tarp, a shovel, a mattock, and a tamping bar in case you run into rocks, something to measure with to get the correct dimensions for the hole, some kind of water source, such as a hose or buckets of water. The tree will need up to 15 gallons of water at planting, organic mulch of some kind, such as shredded bark or wood chips, and compost, which is natural fertilizer to provide nutrients for the newly planted tree. No other fertilizer is needed. For the period of time between bare rooting the tree and planting it, keep the root ball moist and covered to protect it from heat, wind, and sun. The exposed roots can quickly dry out. We usually pour some water on the roots and cover the root ball with a tarp until the tree goes into the ground. Before we plant it, that is, while the tree is still lying on the ground, we need to check the branches to see if any pruning is needed. Very little pruning should be done at the planting stage, since the tree will need all its branches to survive. But sometimes branches are damaged while being transported, and they should be pruned, along with any dead branches, at this point.
Yeah, the first thing is we want to clean up the tree, take everything off of it that's on it. It's a pretty tall tree. It's harder to do this once the tree is up, so we do this while it's still on the ground. But we already dug the hole, and we're not sure it's quite right, so we're going to lift the tree and and place it into the hole just to get a sense of whether the hole is deep enough and wide enough for the planting.
Deciding how deep and wide the hole should be is mainly based on the size of the root ball. Measure its width and depth. The farthest the roots extend downward from the trunk determines how deep the hole should be. Even for this large tree, the root ball is only 14 inches deep, so you don't have to dig a deep hole. But the tree will do better if the hole is much wider than the root ball, ideally 3 times as wide at the top and gradually sloping to a narrower bottom.
Talk about this.
Yes, so when you just try to decide whether the tree is properly placed vertically relative to ground level, grade, we place a stake across the top of the hole, and then we want to make sure that this feature right here, which is the point where you can see the trunk comes down and starts to flare out here, and this point in the flare right here is where the roots start. That's the level that we use to determine how deep we want to plant it. And since we've disturbed all this soil and we're going to be putting in loose soil around it, it's going to settle a little bit. So we deliberately are going to plant the tree a little bit high because eventually it'll settle. And right now it's just about where we'd want it, but it doesn't take into consideration settlement. So we're probably going to put a little bit of soil underneath to lift it a little, maybe about an inch. Hang on a second.
He's compressing it so it's a little bit more solid.
Okay. So we built a little bit of a mound of soil at the bottom of the hole.
You're gonna hold it up
just to give it a kind of a little
Pull
pedestal
it
to
to
rest
you a
on. And we're going to pull all these roots outward, because the ideal position for the roots would be coming out this way, a little bit downward and outward. If we didn't pull them out like this and we start to put in soil, they'd all be pushed downwards, straight down, and we don't want that to happen. We want them to be going outward like this. So we're starting the process that they call backfilling. So we're taking the soil, putting it back into the hole, and my job is to work the soil in around the roots so that there aren't any air holes. And in a moment we're going to add some water and make kind of a big mud pie, what we call a slurry. The purpose of that is to make sure there aren't any air holes. Because where there are air holes, it doesn't do the roots any good, because
water now.
yeah, because there's nothing in that hole for the tree to use. It wants water and nutrients, and the water and nutrients are in the little spaces in between the particles of soil. So now we're going to create a slurry, which just means we're going to throw some water in there.
Enough?
Yep. And we're going to work that muddy mess in between the roots.
You can see how much it's settling.
Yeah, but it settles a
Some
little
water.
bit right away. So vinyl gloves are a good thing to use for this. It's pretty warm today, but on a cold day this is no fun if you have wet gloves. So all the while that we're backfilling the hole with the soil, we have to make sure that the tree stands up straight. So one person has the job through the whole process of holding the tree up until the tree can stand on its own by our having filled in enough of the soil to hold it in place. So we'll just continue to backfill like this. We'll get it maybe another third full, and then we'll add some more water and create a new slurry. I'm just working the soil in between the roots and trying to keep them moving outward.
This is also a very useful way to do it, is to put the dirt on a tarp, because it makes it so much easier to backfill the hole.
Very true.
If the soil was out here sitting on the meadow grass, it'd be hard to
get back in. And
Good job. Looks like we need a little bit
bit more soil here, doesn't it? Looks like we're a little bit below grade. We've got
We got compost
plenty.
in too.
well, plus we have those buckets full.
Oh,
right.
Soil. Yeah.
Right. I'll go get some of those.
Yeah, just get one. I think all of them's over in each here.
We're now going to do what's called top dressing. We're adding a 1-inch layer of compost on top of the soil to provide natural fertilizer for the tree. Combined with the wood chips that we will use for mulch, this is all the additional nutrients the tree will need to augment the nutrients in the soil. Sometimes compost is mixed into the soil in the hole as a process called amending the soil. We prefer top dressing to amending because as the compost decays, it uses oxygen. If the compost is mixed in with the soil, it is competing with the roots for oxygen. Applied on the surface, compost gets its oxygen from the air.
So the last phase of the planting process is to protect the tree by applying mulch. Mulch serves a number of different purposes. It will gradually over time decay just like the compost and release its nutrients into the soil, and the roots will pick them up, use it to grow the tree.
I guess we got one more.
They act as insulation in the cold weather and insulation in the hot weather. They keep the tree a little cooler in the summer and a little warmer, the roots anyhow, in the winter.
Proper mulching uses the 3-3-3 rule. That means leave a space of 3 inches between the trunk and where the mulch starts. The mulch should be no more than 3 inches deep at any point, and it should extend at least 3 feet out in every direction from the trunk of the tree. Now for the post-planting phase, when you may determine that it is necessary to provide protection for the tree against deer. You may need to stake it for support, and you may choose to use a water bag for watering. If you do, the tools and materials that you will need would include a heavy hammer or a stake driver for your stakes, a wire cutter for the wire fencing used in tree cages, cable ties to secure the wire fencing to the stakes used to hold the cage in place, 4-foot high 2-inch by 2-inch wire mesh fencing, and pressure treated 1 by 1 inch stakes in either 3 or 4 foot length.
Yeah, okay, so the final stage in areas where you have an issue of a lot of deer around is to provide some protection against the deer who have a habit of wanting to do a couple of things. First, they want to browse, they want to chew these nice green tips. And secondly, the male deer, every year they grow a new rack of antlers, and they have kind of a fine velvety cover on them, which ends up being itchy to the deer, and they want to scrape it off. And the perfect thing they think for doing that is the trunk of a thin tree like this.
Sure.
So
Hang on. Good.
all right, then we're going to secure the stake to the cage using cable ties.
The next question is whether your tree needs to be staked. Most trees don't need staking, but bare-rooted trees may, because we've taken the heavy soil off the roots. And sometimes trees planted in windy or wet areas need staking. So how do you decide? What you want to do is hold the trunk at about midway to the top of the tree, about halfway up. Gently pull on the trunk side to side. In the meantime, be watching the root ball. If the root ball moves while you're pulling on the trunk, you will need to stake the tree. Staking is temporary, so you're going to want to retest it again at about 3 months after planting. Same procedure. Grab a hold of the trunk at about midway up it and gently pull side to side while looking at the root ball. If it doesn't move, you can take off the stakes and the webbing. If it does move, you'll want to retest it again after about 2 months. The last issue in the post-planting phase is whether you want to use water bags for watering the tree. They're a good idea for many situations. When you use them, you save water. There is no runoff or evaporation, and they are inexpensive and reusable. Keep in mind that around here in the Virginia Piedmont, they are not needed over winter since water demand will have gone down, and they provide a shelter for rodents that can damage the tree. Use them for the first year of planting and until the drip line of the growing tree extends past the area covered by the water bag. Keep watering the tree well for at least the first 3 years. Here's what we did in this video. We bare-rooted the tree and kept the exposed roots moist and covered until planted. We dug the hole as deep as the root ball, but about 3 times as wide. We used the root collar, the point where the trunk stops and the roots start, to set the level of the tree relative to ground level, and planted a couple inches high to accommodate settling of the soil. We backfilled the hole 1/3 at a time, mixing the soil with water and working it between the roots to avoid air pockets. One of us held the trunk erect until it could stand by itself. We top-dressed the soil with compost. We placed organic mulch over the compost using the 3-3-3 rule. And lastly, we provided a tree cage. At this site, deer is a problem, but cages also discourage vandalism in urban areas. This tree didn't need to be staked, but we described how to do it, and we also showed how a water bag can help you meet the water demand of a newly planted tree. Good luck with your tree plantings. For further information, email us at education3@cvilletreestewards.org.